How I miss the open skies of the hinterlands!
Hello everyone! Falstad Wildhammer is currently member of the Council of Three Hammers, and his deeds have earned him a spot as a hero in Heroes of the Storm. That's why I thought it'd be a good idea to take a look at his story and see what he's been up to, so let's begin, shall we? Falstad is a Wildhammer dwarf, and these days we know them for living in the hinterlands and flying under griffins, but it wasn't always like that. In the past, all three dwarven clans used to live together near Ironforge, and they were ruled by one king, Modemus Envolmar. Modemus passed away though, and this led to a civil war between the clans, leaving the Bronzebeards victorious and the rulers of Ironforge. The Wildhammer clan moved to build their new city of Batol, while the Dark Iron Dwarves built their city called Faruzan. The clans were all doing pretty good in the new cities, but the Dark Iron Dwarves could not get over the fact that they lost the war, so they attacked both Batol and Ironforge. The Wildhammer Dwarves at Batol, they managed to kill the queen of the Dark Iron Dwarves, but her death left a dark stain upon the city. When the war was over and the Dark Iron Dwarves were defeated, the Wildhammer clan found their city uninhabitable. When they found out about that, the Bronzebeard clan, they offered them a place within the borders of Ironforge, but the Wildhammers decided to move away and live within the hinterlands. There, they built their city of Airy Peak, they grew closer to nature, and they even bonded with the mighty griffins of the area. That's a little bit about the history of the clans. Now the first time that we hear about Falstad is in the novel Day of the Dragon. This book takes place after Beyond the Dark Portal, so after the Alliance expedition went to Outland and closed the Dark Portal behind them to stop the Orcish horde once and for all. Curdon Wildhammer, the leader of the Wildhammers at the time, was part of this expedition, and since everyone assumed that the expedition members died, Falstad became the leader of the clan. At this point in the story, the Red Dragon Alexstrasza, also known as Croesus, desperately wants to save his beloved queen Alexstrasza. Alexstrasza has been captured by the orcs with the use of the demon soul, and they forced the red dragons to carry them in battle and fight against the alliance. Being the aspect of life, this act on its own was horrible enough, but they also forced Alexstrasza to bear more children and keep the dragons coming. Even with the aid of the red dragons, the first horde still managed to lose the war, and the Wildhammer dwarves played a huge part in that. Dragons are not the only beings that dominate the skies, and the combined might of Gryphon and Dwarf led to several alliance victories. Now despite losing this main war, the orcs who had captured Alexstrasza, they had no intention to give her up or run away. This meant that something had to be done, so Croesus recruited the human mage Ronin to help him save his queen, and he told Ronin to make his way to Cas Modan. From there he could travel to Batol, since that's where Alexstrasza was being held captive. Ronan accepted this suicide mission since he was under probation by the Kirin Tor and they had nearly kicked him out. While Ronan was fighting during the second war against the orcs, he released a spell that took out a bunch of warlocks which were trying to raise a demon from the dead. But unfortunately, his companions got in the way of the blast and they were killed as well. Since Croesus has used his high elven form to get him a position as senior member within the Kirin Tor, fulfilling this mission would put Ronan back in good grace and possibly even boost his reputation. Ronan met with his guide Varisa Windrunner, and they had the plan in mind of going to the local port called Hesik. From there they could take a ship to Cas Modan, but before they were even on their way, they were attacked by an orc on a red dragon. They might have lost their lives and failed their mission at the very start, but thankfully Falstad and his Wildhammer crew were patrolling the skies and they took on the great beast. Ronan and Varisa, they took the opportunity to escape, but when they reached Hesik, they saw that it was in ruins. 3 griffins descended from the sky, and Falstad explained that the dragons had attacked the port, and if it was not for them, it would all be in ruins. This presented Ronan with quite a problem, since the ship that was supposed to take him to Cas Modan was now lying at the bottom of the sea. In a crazy and desperate attempt to get across, Ronan asked the Wildhammer dwarfs if they could give him a ride on the back of one of their griffins. What you have to understand is that at the time mages were not the most respected kind of people. Some even called them condemned souls, and even though dwarves and humans allied against the orcs, they still didn't want more to do with each other than what was absolutely necessary. They would have flat out refused Ronan, but Varisa managed to convince Falstad by using her charms and playing to his ego. It didn't hurt that Falstad had quite a weakness for beautiful high elves, so for her, he would take them across the sea and to Cas Modan. At first, it looked like it'd be a smooth journey, but then the group was attacked by 2 red dragons and their orcish riders. Farisa was riding behind Falstad, while Ronan was riding behind on a different Gryphon, and his Gryphon was smacked out of the sky. Both the Gryphon and dwarf crashed and died in the dark waters below, but Ronan was saved by Deathwing himself. You see, Deathwing knew about Ronan's mission and he actually wanted him to succeed. He knew about Alexstrasza and the orcs, since he had been the one to show the orcs where they could find the demon soul. Now he wanted Alexstrasza's axe, but he couldn't just show up and assault Batol. That was far too risky. The orcs could smash all the eggs before he even reached them, so instead he wanted them to believe that the alliance was coming for them. This would force them to move Alexstrasza and the eggs to a new location, which would allow Deathwing to take the eggs for himself and make them part of his mad forces. Falstad and Farisa, they saw the dead Gryphon in the water, and Falstad assumed that his clanmate and Ronan were dead. But Farisa refused to give up so easily. Despite Deathwing showing up, she still wanted to fly over the water just for one sweep to make certain that Ronan wasn't waiting for help. Reluctantly, Falstad agreed, and as he dove down, Deathwing started to fight with the red dragon. Both of them looked up, and Farisa noticed that Deathwing was using every weapon in his arsenal except his left forepaw. He kept that one protected and close to his body, and despite it being an insane idea, Farisa realized that Deathwing was holding Ronan. When the battle between dragons was over, she told Falstad to follow Deathwing, which Falstad did not like one bit. Dwarves are no cowards and don't run away from fights, but a giant like Deathwing, that's simply suicide. You ask much. The Gryphon's wary and I will need to land soon. Please, just as far as you can. I cannot leave him like this. I have sworn an oath. No oath would take you this far, the Gryphon rider muttered, but he nonetheless steered his mount back towards Casmodan. The animal made noises of protest, but obeyed. They followed Deathwing as best as they could, but somehow they managed to lose the gigantic black beast. When Falstad placed his Gryphon on the ground, they looked around but they found no sign of Ronan. Instead, they found a goblin named Krill who had seen the black beast and the mage with his own eyes. Farisa told them that if he would lead them to the place where he had seen this, they would set him free, so Krill led the way. True to his word, they found a spot where Deathwing and Ronan had talked with each other, and Deathwing had told Ronan about his plans. How he wanted him to reach Batol, how he would help him, and what would happen if Ronan didn't obey. As promised, Farisa set the goblin free, but they still had to find a way into Batol. They couldn't just fly there since the territory was full of red dragons and the orcish riders, but Krill knew a way to sneak in and was willing to show them since Farisa had given him his freedom again. He led them to a place where it was safe to land and they could travel further on foot. But when they reached the destination, Falstad and Farisa walked right into the goblin's trap. Krill was actually an agent working for Deathwing, and Deathwing had only use for Ronan. The sand beneath their feet started to suck them in, and when Falstad's Gryphon tried to save his master, the sand reached up and tried to grab the Gryphon. Deeper and deeper they sank down below in the sand. In a desperate attempt to save her companion, Farisa reached out and told Falstad to grab her hands, but it was already too late. The dwarves had disappeared, and the last thing Farisa saw before the darkness took her was the goblin and his toothy smile. When Farisa woke up again, she found herself in the hands of a couple of trolls who were debating about who to eat first. Farisa's slender body seemed like a nice dessert, while Falstad would be the main course. But before they could feast, they were attacked by the hill dwarves. The dwarf Rum and his crew, they attacked the trolls, and they were there because they were unable to leave the lands when the horde took it over, and they had to burrow deeper than they'd ever done before. In their own way, they continued to fight against the orcs, but battling against dragons within those close corners, that's just an uneven match. Nonetheless, they saved Farisa and Falstad, they got to know each other, and the old rivalry between the clans showed. The hill dwarves called Falstad a butterfly, while Falstad said,
"It'd take a hand's worth of these hill dwarves to bring one from the Eyrie down."
Farisa put an end to their bickering right away by telling them that the horde and the orcs were the true enemy and that fighting amongst each other was no option. Rum and Falstad, they shook hands and they tried to decide what to do next. Farisa still wanted to fight Ronan, and although Ram had told them that it was pure suicide, he did show them the way into Batol. As they made the journey through the tunnels, Farisa found Ram talking to himself, but in truth he was talking to a crystal given to him by Krezus. Ram and his fellow dwarves had been waiting patiently for this moment for a very long time, and Krezus had moved his pieces on the board. By discovering this, Farisa wondered if she could still trust Rum, but he handed her the crystal, and in her mind Croesus explained the situation. He would guide them to Ronan and they could rescue him, since in the meantime Ronan had made his way to Grim Batol, had managed to get himself captured, just like Deathwing had planned. They made their way through the tunnels, they faced off against the dragon and his orcish master. They found Ronan, but in his chamber, a gigantic flame golem was standing guard. Falstad and Farisa, they battled with it, while Ronan took the opportunity to focus his magic and he freed himself. He was about to unleash his spell to destroy the golem, but the goblin Krill, he showed up again and he started to choke Ronan. A single fire blast sent the goblin away, and the goblin claimed that the golem surely would finish the job. But before he was able to leave the chamber, the golem, he took aim and he spat a huge fireball towards the goblin and turned him into a pile of ash. The golem's next target was Farisa, but Ronan put up a shield spell and the blast reflected, destroying the golem and bringing down the ceiling on all of them. The group blacked out, but thankfully Ronan's shield spell stayed intact. Only inches of the shield remained and the rocks were about to crash down upon them. Under his head, Ronan felt a pebble and he tried to remove it, since keeping the spell up was giving him enough of a headache, but when he touched it, he felt the slightest hint of magic. This was no ordinary stone. This was a crystal given to the goblin by Deathwing, which allowed him to communicate from a distance, much like the crystal Croesus had given to Rum. Ronan placed the gem in his pocket and he focused on casting a teleportation spell. It took everything in him to simultaneously keep the shield spell active and get them out of there, but he managed to teleport them away all the way to the top of the mountain with just a few inches to spare. Falstad was pale, had a wild look in his eyes, but he was extremely happy to be out in the open again. Never, never, never will I crawl into another tunnel. From now on, it's only the sky for me. They all managed to escape Grim Batol safely, but Ronan's mission wasn't over yet. Queen Alexstrasza was still a captive, and he knew that the orcs would begin transporting the eggs and the queen. They had to make their way down again, but Ronan was too weak to teleport them down and be any use in a fight. As luck would have it, Falstad was still a Wildhammer dwarf, and he had a whistle which he used to summon his Gryphon, and the beast carried them down. A lot of things at this point in the story happened simultaneously. Deathwing showed up to claim his long-awaited reward, Alexstrasza's ex. Alexstrasza showed up and he tried to save his queen, but the demon soul was too powerful and he was nearly killed. Ronan gets his hands on the crystal that they used to communicate with Croesus, and Croesus teleports him to his location and reveals that he's actually a dragon. Ysera, Nosdormu and Malagos, the aspects, they show up since Croesus has been doing his best to convince them to join this battle. They have no chance to stand against Deathwing, since part of their power is locked away within the demon soul, but they still give it their best to buy Ronan and Croesus some time to get their hands on the Vaal disc. Croesus then carries Ronan into battle, while Ram and his crew they show up to fight the orcs, and Ronan faces off against the orc called Necros, who wields the disc. Spells are fired, but Necros manages to get his hands around Ronan's neck. He was choking the life out of him until Falstad and Farisa they showed up and they knocked the orc to the floor. High in the sky, Falstad, without a weapon, he screamed and taunted the orcs below as if he was willing to face them all. Now by knocking Necros to the ground, Necros lost the demon soul and he lost his control over the Red Queen. Finally, her moment of justice had come. She roared and she threw the orc in the air, swallowing him whole. She thanked Ronan and Farisa for freeing her, and she then turned her attention to the battle of the aspects in the sky. She too had given up a portion of her powers to the demon soul, but nonetheless she joined her fellow aspects in the sky. Down on the ground, Ronan tried to think of a way to help the aspects, and he found the demon soul on the floor. He couldn't use the artifact against Deathwing since he's the only dragon immune to its powers, but he remembered that the aspect powers were locked within the item. If he could destroy it, then he could return their powers and restore them to their full glory. First, he tried to smash it with a rock, but it didn't even make a dent. Then he asked Falstad to strike it with the orcish axe that the dwarf had managed to get his hands on, but the weapon simply shattered. Ronan realized that the item must be protected by magic, and perhaps if he had another talisman, like the one Croesus had given them, he could create a spell powerful enough to destroy it. Then he remembered the black crystal that he had picked up in the cave, created from a scale of Deathwing himself. Deathwing was the one who had created this device. It was very possible that the crystal could do what nothing else could. As he sliced the device, the scale moved through it like cutting butter. The powers locked away so long ago, they now unleashed and a great fountain of colors burst out of the disc. Ronan used his own magic to guide the powers back to their owners, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the aspects returned to the full glory. 4 against 1, they outnumbered Deathwing, and they easily defeated the aspect of death. Realizing that he had lost, Deathwing retreated, while the aspects gave chase. Alexstrasza stayed behind. She took care of Cressus, and together with the dwarves, human mage and high elf ranger, they took care of the remaining orcs and they liberated Batol. With Queen Alexstrasza freed, Ronan's mission was done. He and Varisa, they would stay together and create new adventures, while Falstad leaves them to travel to the Airy Peak and share his story. Thank you for everything, Ronan said. No, human, thank you. I'd like to see another rider with a greater song of glory to sing than I've got. We'll turn the heads of the ladies my way, believe you me. Falstad returned to lead his people at the Airy Peak and share the tale as how he helped liberate Batol, save the Queen Alexstrasza and save the world from Deathwing. During World of Warcraft, he played a minor role as a quest giver while you were trying to find a pilot that fell at the sunken temple, and you did this for the quest giver Brohan Caskbelly. In the novel Stormrage, he showed up for the wedding of Tyrande and Malfurion, and in the novel The Shattering, he became one of the 3 leaders of the Council of 3 Hammers. In that book, King Magni Bronzebeard tries to communicate with the land by using an ancient Titan ritual. The land was in turmoil during those days since the cataclysm was approaching, and Magni wanted to find out what was going on. The ritual did allow him to communicate with the land, but it also turned him into a crystal. With Magni out of the picture, his daughter Moira showed up and she took control of the city while also kidnapping Prince Anduin Wrynn. This pissed off his father Varian, who joined the SI7 team to take Moira out, but Anduin convinced him to give Moira a chance. Despite the way that she took the city, she was still the rightful heir to Ironforge, and Varian said that like him, Moira would have to become better than she currently was. She was unfit to rule Ironforge on her own, and she would have to earn her place. That's why each Dwarven clan would be represented by a leader. Moira Faurazan would represent the Dark Iron clan, Muradin Bronzebeard would represent the Bronzebeard clan, and Falstad Wildhammer would represent the Wildhammer clan. The dwarves cheered and applauded for this plan, but Blizzard, during the Mist of Pandaria beta, they made a little mistake. They almost killed Falstad off without any explanation, but thankfully Red Shirt Guy set them straight.
Hello. I just finished reading The Shattering yesterday, and I noticed something. It said that Falstad Wildhammer was going to be on the Council of 3 Hammers, but in the beta it's Kurdrin Wildhammer, and Falstad is not in the game at all. What happened to him?
Isn't Falstad dead? From Day of the Dragon? No?
No, he survived, and in fact, he was the leader of Airy Peak in Vanilla WoW through Wrath of the Lich King.
Right, of course. Right. Yeah, Alex, what's up with that?
Thanks for pointing that out. We're gonna get that fixed.
So instead of Falstad, they merely placed Kurdrin Wildhammer as leader for the Wildhammer dwarves. As a reward for pointing this out, they added the official Wildhammer fact checker into the game, and they wrote a short story about Kurdrin and Falstad. When Kurdrin Wildhammer returned from Outland, he felt an overwhelming urge to make up for the decades he had been absent. He had not officially taken over the title of Wildhammer Highthane, which means leader of the Wildhammers, but he had ordered his clanmates without consulting Falstad. Although Varian had claimed that Falstad should be representing the Wildhammers, it was Kurdrin who took up that position, claiming that his friend Falstad did not possess the experience to undertake such a task. The Wildhammer dwarves were so happy about Kurdrin's return from Outland that they backed up his reasoning. When Kurdrin looked at Falstad, he could see the anger and hurt in his eyes, as if Kurdrin had felt that Falstad's 20 years of bravely leading the clan had been meaningless. Now this story is more focused on Kurdrin than it is on Falstad. It's about Kurdrin accepting that time doesn't stand still, that holding on to the past is a road that leads to a dead end, that Wildhammer, Dark Iron and Bronzebeard dwarves all have to let go of the past in order to build a new future. Most of all, he realized that he didn't belong in the council, and that Varian Alliance's first choice had been the right one to begin with. And so Falstad took his rightful place amongst the Council of Three Hammers, while Curdwen would find his way to the Twilight Highlands, where he aided the Alliance and battled against the Twilight Hammer clan. Even with the right members in the council, having all the clans working together is no easy task. The Dark Iron Dwarves have a dark history with the other clans, and during the Cataclysm, the Twilight Hammer clan tried to make use of this weakness. They had Dark Iron Dwarves attacking the airfield of Ironforge, and this made it look like Moira couldn't keep her own people under control. Falstad told her that if she cannot govern her own people, that she had no place at their table. Naturally, Moira would never do such a thing, since there's little point to destroying her son's future kingdom. This meant that there was only one possible suspect who could be behind this: Ambassador Slaghammer. We seize the ambassador, he confesses to his crimes, he says that half-breed Rund will never be his emperor, and we lead him to his prison. This, however, would not be the last time that old hatreds between the clan would cause problems.
Once upon a time, moments ago in fact, a great king sought help from a trio of powerful dwarves, the Council of Three Hammers. The king's scouts had discovered that Zandalari trolls threatened the Dwarven capital. Surely, the king thought, if he helped them with their troll problem, they would give him more troops for his campaign against the Horde. But what the king did not realize is that the dwarves did not trust one another. "We cannot help you," said the Bronzebeard dwarf, "for if we turn our back on the Dark Irons, they will defeat the Wildhammer and take over Ironforge." "We cannot help you," said the Wildhammer dwarf, "for if we turn our back on the Dark Irons, they will defeat the Bronzebeard and take over Ironforge." Oh, the king was furious. "If none of you help, then Ironforge will fall under siege." Only one dwarf offered to help the king. "We will lend you our strength," said Moira of the Dark Iron. "We will trust our dwarven brothers, and we will show them what loyalty means." And so Moira and the High King set out into the snow to save the city, leaving the others to think about their actions. What happens next? I must know. The High King, his champions, and the Dark Iron Dwarves worked together to save Ironforge. The other Dwarven leaders were ashamed of their behavior and vowed never again to allow fear or distrust to cloud their judgment. And so it was a human king who helped to unite the Dwarven clans so long divided. Free to trust one another, all three Dwarven leaders pledged their full strength to the Alliance cause.
Moira and the Dark Iron Dwarves, they stepped up to the plate, and now the three Dwarven clans should finally be able to trust each other and work together. Looking back at Falstad's story, I realized that I've talked a lot about other characters and events in which he played a role, but it's mainly because Falstad so far has played more of a supportive role than a main role. That doesn't mean that he's not a badass. He started out as a Gryphon riding dwarf, slaying dragons and kicking the crap out of the orcs. He then teamed up with Ronan and Varisa to liberate the Queen of the Red Dragons herself, liberate Batol and kick Deathwing's butt. 20 years he served as leader of the Wildhammer dwarves, while his friend Curdwen was presumed to be dead. When Curdwen returned and pushed him out of his place, he had the wisdom to forgive his friends and take his position in the council for the good of the clan. Only time will tell if more adventures await this dwarf, but for now I'm going to end this video. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. Subscribe if you like my videos, and until next time, guys, see ya!